What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So this is going to be the final summit here at Motorfest before Season 7, and with that is going to be the Fury Legacy. That is going to get you the Mazda RX-7 Red Fury Edition, and this summit is going to have some interesting things to it. But before we get to that, though, we're going to have the Red Spotlight Rooftop, $200,000 and 200,000 XP. Honestly, the rewards are pretty dang good, and I gotta admit, this is probably one of the better summit cars we've had in a minute. Now, when it does come to the summit, though, this one is probably going to annoy a good amount of people, and that is going to come down to one particular thing here, which is probably going to be the speed trap. Now, a few things, though, guys, that I do want to mention. It's going to be mainly based on Street Tier 2 and one Tier 1 event. Besides that, though, all the events are probably going to be fairly straightforward, and you've most likely encountered every single event. For the escape here, I did end up deciding to do something a tad different. I did end up using a Nitrochem set to test it, and I got 154,000 yards. It was honestly very easy. If you're having issues, just follow my route with the Motorfest edition. You should honestly be just fine on this one. It's honestly very simple. For the Slalom, though, as I did want to test something out on this one, though, I ended up doing this 3 different ways with the Nismo. The first one, I did end up using pretty much 7 random gold parts, having skilled on every single one, and I got around 150,900 points. I then did end up running a full score breaker set, pretty much, having skilled on every single part again. That got me over 157,000 points, which is probably fairly obvious. But then I was like, you know what? Let me run this one more time. I did end up having 3 score breaker parts, which give you a 50% boost, but I did end up having skilled on every single part. With that, guys, I got over 156,000. So no, I would say you definitely do not need a full-on score breaker to get a high score on this. The big thing is to at least aim for 3 of the parts, then have other, I guess you could say the 4 other parts, not 7 other parts. Have the 4 other parts having skilled, and you should be good to go. Now, the issue is probably going to come down to the speed trap for a couple of different reasons. For one, there is going to be a couple of different ways you can do this. If you would like, you could do the normal way, which is probably going to jump into something like the Carrera and get around 205 to 207 miles per hour. Mind you, that's going to get you around 141,000 points, guys. I will show this in the background. Legit, my first run using the Carrera got 205 miles an hour. Got around 141,000 points, which honestly is probably going to be the best way to do it, and the #1 way to not completely lose your mind, I would probably guess. The second way, though, is you're probably going to most likely find people flying over like a jump. That is going to be the other annoying way that can get you well over 200 miles an hour. I would recommend using the Mach E because you don't have to shift it. It's, going to be electric. So you could pretty much just hit nitrous and pretty much go flying if you would like. That's all you have to do. But you are going to have to jump over basically the bridge area, like on the side of the road, jumping all the way over the trees. For me, I did end up bouncing off a tree and then falling into it. The way is, though, pretty much where I was, is to jump over it, going over the trees, and then hitting the objective itself. To be honest, I would say being able to do this is not only going to be kind of annoying, some of it is probably going to take some time because you have to hit it at the perfect angle, basically in the right spot as well to fly all the way over it and then into the objective. To be honest, I would recommend just using the Porsche. That way you guys can get 140,000 points and most likely not lose your mind on it. Besides that, though, when it does come to the events, to be real, I feel like many of these are going to be very straightforward. For example, in the vehicle alone, you are going to have to use the Fury Edition, which is going to be the RX-7. I gotta admit, guys, the handling on this car is honestly fairly wonky, but once you probably get used to it, probably not trying to oversteer and make the car slide a bit, you are most likely going to be doing fairly decent. Overall, the track is also pretty easy to do. There is going to be turns and stuff, which again, the RX-7 is a bit odd to drive, but this thing really does probably need some adjusting and most likely not base settings. We're then going to have the Nissan Street Tier 2 event here, which again, I did end up using the GTR Haru edition instead of the other GTRs, which is the R32. That is probably by far going to be the best overall option, which you guys can probably tell from the leaderboard here. But I would recommend trying out the other cars if you would like. But the biggest thing is, people are going to be going after these cars. Now, one thing I want to mention, my scores would probably be much higher if I used some of the better cars in these classes, but also, if I was using a Nitrochemist set. I was not. I was pretty much using a Loot Digger or an XP Magnet on basically every single event. So yeah, I'm automatically going to be slower, but hey, makes it more fun. For example, the Honda Civic Type R event, this one is going to be very easy, guys. The reason is the Type R is a great car, handles very well. The overall top speed is honestly not that great, but I would say the Type R is going to be a fun and good overall vehicle, at least for the handling. For the caught red-handed, you are going to have to use the GTR Nismo. This is also going to be a fairly decent car, guys. Again, I'm not running pro settings on anything, so I would say being able to do that, getting 2 minutes and 9 seconds kind of messing around, isn't honestly going to be that terrible. For the Street Tier 2 Honda event, this one honestly made me laugh because if you click on it, you are going to notice that you can run a motorcycle. Does that make any sense, bro? The motorcycles are terrible, and they're not even going to be fast enough to go against the cars, so why is that an option? Doesn't really make sense, but you're probably going to want to use the NSX. I mean, basically every other car is kind of going to be at a slight disadvantage, although the S2000 Motorfest edition might be pretty decent in this. To be real, guys, the rest of the events, again, are probably going to be straightforward. I mean, I'm going to guess and say a lot of players probably will recognize the events, but the biggest thing is most likely going to be that speed trap. Besides all of that, though, if you guys have any questions, do let me know in the comments below. I would say a lot of players are most likely going to go after the Mazda RX-7, but I am really curious to see the overall player counts in this summit compared to the previous month and a half or so, to where they've been pretty dang low.